I stood in my own kitchen, hand on the fridge door, only to hear it click. Locked. A laminated schedule fluttered beside it, taped on like a warning label. Portions, not punishment, my son had said. As if hunger was a habit I needed breaking. As if I hadn't fed him for 30 years without a single chart. I smiled politely, nodded quietly, then spent the next 6 weeks pulling every key, every code, every dollar from beneath his fingers. He locked the fridge. I locked my legacy. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The kitchen was quiet when Marge shuffled in, slippers soft against the laminate floor. Early sun crept through the blinds in fractured lines, striping the counter in dull gold. She moved slowly, careful not to wake the house, one hand pressed lightly to her lower back. The fridge hummed low, steady, almost a comfort now. She reached for the handle, click. The door didn't give. Marge stared. A small silver latch with a built-in combination lock stared back at her, bolted cleanly across the top seam of the fridge doors like it had always been there. Her hand hovered for a second. Then she tried it again, as if maybe she'd imagined it. The lock clicked in protest. Behind her, footsteps. Kevin entered, wiping his hands on a dish towel like he'd just finished doing something important. "Morning," he said casually, then held up a small black key between two fingers. "Don't panic. It's for your own good," Marge blinked. "What is this?" "We're going to work on portions," Kevin said. "Your doctor said, what was it, caloric discipline. This helps you stay on track." Before she could answer, Alyssa's voice chimed in from the hallway. "It's not punishment. It's progress." She breezed in, coffee in hand, lips painted coral and curved into a practiced smile. "We all agreed you needed some structure." "This is a tool." "A tool?" Marge echoed. Her stomach gave a small, traitorous grumble. She hadn't eaten since before 6 yesterday. Alyssa nodded, crossing the room to place her mug on the counter. "Structure brings safety. It's a way to show love, like organizing pills or setting up phone limits," Kevin added. "You remember that with Riley?" "You thanked us." As if on cue, Riley appeared at the edge of the hallway, still in her oversized hoodie, socks dragging slightly as she paused. Her eyes landed on the fridge, then on the key in her dad's hand. Her face tightened. "Why is the fridge locked?" Kevin turned, all brightness. "Hey, kiddo, just making things healthier around here." Riley didn't speak, but her silence carried a weight far heavier than words. She disappeared just as quietly as she'd come. Alyssa stepped closer and unrolled a laminated schedule. "These are your meal windows," she said sweetly, taping it to the front of the fridge with floral magnets. "We thought clear expectations would help." There were blocks of time in pastel, 7:30 to 8 a.m., light breakfast 12 to 12:30 p.m., controlled lunch 5:30 to 6 p.m., supervised dinner. No snacks, no late tea, nothing outside the blocks. Kevin handed the key to Alyssa like it was a ceremonial passing of power. "We'll keep this in the upstairs cabinet." Marge didn't respond. She looked at the schedule again, then down at her hands, still swollen from her last arthritis flare. She reached for the drawer by the microwave and pulled out a pen and a small floral notebook. In smooth, unshaken strokes, she wrote, "September 3rd. Fridge locked without warning. Kevin says it's for health." Alyssa smiled. Riley looked away. She clicked the pen shut and closed the notebook. Then she placed it back in the drawer on top of her utility bills and a worn booklet titled Senior Living Options, Lexington Area. Alyssa gave her shoulder a little pat. "You're going to feel so much better." You'll see Kevin glanced at the time. "I've got a call." Remember, portions, not punishment. They left her there in the too quiet kitchen. The fridge was locked. The key was gone. The laminated schedule fluttered slightly under the breath of the vent. Marge walked to the sink, poured herself a glass of tap water, and drank slowly. Her reflection stared back at her from the microwave's black glass. Wrinkled, heavy, silent. She set the cup down. Then, without a word, She walked down the hall to the guest bedroom, opened the closet, looked at the empty corner behind the boxes of Christmas lights, and she measured it with her eyes. The box arrived 2 days later. No label, no fuss, just a nondescript brown rectangle sitting on the porch, wedged between the screen door and a potted mum Alyssa hadn't watered since July. Marge pulled it in herself, inch by inch, across the hardwood with quiet, determined tugs. Her wrists ached. She paused twice to catch her breath. Then she closed the guest room door, locked it, and slit the tape with her sewing scissors. Inside, a compact mini fridge in muted gray, small enough to tuck into the corner of her guest room closet. Quiet enough to go unnoticed. She'd paid cash at Walmart, used the self-checkout, declined the receipt. She peeled off the instruction manual and tucked it into a Bible on the nightstand. That same afternoon, Tina arrived at the back door with 2 tote bags full of quiet rebellion. Labeled containers, sliced rotisserie chicken, diced melon, protein shakes and vanilla, and salted caramel. Nothing too loud when it opens, Tina whispered, crouching beside the closet. Don't plug it into the outlet behind the dresser. It buzzes. Marge just nodded. She hadn't spoken much since the lock went on the fridge, but she was writing more and watching more, eyes wide open. That night, the house felt colder than usual. Kevin stood at the kitchen table, holding an unopened yogurt. "You're not finishing your meals, Mom," he said, shaking it slightly like it had betrayed him. "You should thank me. A little discipline is working. I can see it in your face." Marge gave a soft hum of acknowledgement, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. She sat at the table, hands folded neatly in her lap. Alyssa appeared from upstairs, holding a crumpled napkin and an empty cereal bowl. "Also, just a note, I'm going to start tracking what gets tossed. Wasted food is wasted love, you know?" Marge raised her eyebrows slightly. "Wasted love," Alyssa laughed, as if Marge had missed the punchline. "It's just a saying. We'll get through this phase, like she was a toddler again, pushing peas off her plate." That night, Marge waited until the hallway was quiet. The sound machine in Riley's room humming ocean waves. She slipped into the guest room, opened the closet door, and tapped the fridge open. Inside, a small square of cheddar, 3 boiled eggs, and a labeled cup of soup waited. Tina's handwriting was crisp, looping. Add crackers only if needed. Marge ate the egg slowly, sitting on the edge of the bed, the carpet fibers rough under her socks. She chewed carefully, feeling the food hit her stomach with something between relief and defiance. She left no crumbs. The next morning, Kevin made a show of checking the main fridge log. "Looks like someone skipped their applesauce." "That's sugar waste, Mom. You don't get a new one until it's gone." Alyssa hovered behind him with a notepad. "Maybe smaller portions will help." Marge smiled slightly. "Maybe they would." She started taking photos, quiet, methodical documentation. The log taped to the fridge, the schedules, the texts. Kevin's tone when he thought no one was listening. Alyssa's muttered judgments, snapshots of receipts, containers, timestamps. The inside of her own secret fridge, which now included a sticky note. Check power strip weekly. Rotate stock. Don't trust expiration dates alone. By the end of the week, Marge had a full digital folder labeled Wellness Plan, stored on a USB she kept in her sock drawer, inside an old tin of buttons. But the dizziness came anyway. It started on Thursday, a brief sway while unloading laundry. She steadied herself against the dryer. Then again Saturday, while reading on the porch, the lines of the book blurring, her fingers colder than they should be. She didn't say anything to Tina yet. Didn't want concern to slow her down. But Sunday morning, as she stood in the church vestibule folding a bulletin, her vision grayed at the edges. Her knees wobbled. For a second, just a second, she gripped the coat rack to stay upright. "Need a seat?" asked a passing usher. "No," she said softly. "Just thinking too hard." She smiled, then steadied herself again. Sunday evening brought casserole and condescension. Kevin had invited a couple from his office, new hires relocating from Nashville, to show off how multi-generational living was working wonders. Marge recognized the performance the moment she heard him rehearsing it on the phone. Folksy charm, light jokes, and always that air of proud sacrifice. "You don't mind dinner at the table tonight, do you?" he'd asked her earlier, like it was a suggestion. His eyes had already said, "You'll say yes." Marge wore a soft blue sweater and sat at the end of the table with a small portion of over-steamed carrots and dry rotisserie chicken breast. Her appetite was gone, but she chewed slowly, deliberately, eyes alert. "Look at her," Kevin beamed, gesturing toward Marge like a stage prop. "Discipline works." "Mom's finally got some structure." His guest chuckled politely. The woman, Hannah, nodded. "My mom would never agree to that." "It's all about boundaries and love," Alyssa added, refilling wine glasses. "We take care of her like she took care of us." Marge looked up, fork, midair. Kevin leaned back in his chair, smiling wide. She was floating before, just snacking whenever, forgetting bills, misplacing things. Now, we've simplified everything for her. The guest laughed again, awkward this time. Marge reached down slowly and adjusted her purse strap hanging off the chair leg. Inside, her phone was recording. Audio only, volume off, position just right. She had started doing that with increasing regularity, during kitchen talks, evening check-ins, even church rides. Kevin talked too much, and he liked an audience. And of course, he continued. Cutting into his chicken, "I help manage her accounts now too. She doesn't need that stress. Medicare, bills, insurance. Streamlining it all under one roof makes it easier." "Easier for who?" Marge asked quietly. Kevin blinked, then grinned like she'd made a joke. "For everyone, Mom." That night, after the dishes were cleared and the wine washed down with decaf, Marge sat alone in the guest room. The mini fridge hummed in the closet. She pulled her laptop from under the bed, opened her browser, and logged into her checking account. Then her savings, then her credit card portal. It was all altered. Familiar logins, familiar balances, but new tabs appeared. Auto payments she hadn't scheduled. Email notifications rerouted to Kevin's address. And under bill pay management, a name she didn't authorize sat in plain black text. Admin, Kevin Bell. Marge's stomach tightened. She clicked through the permissions and found 3 accounts he had added. Her internet, her electricity, even her garbage pickup. Linked to his phone number, his email. He hadn't just locked the fridge. He'd slowly been locking her out of her own life. She closed the laptop without logging out. Her hands were shaking, not with fear, with a kind of slow-burning clarity. The next morning, she sat on the bench outside Tina's sunroom, sipping weak tea. The wind rolled through the wind chimes like it was hurrying her along. Tina listened silently, then folded her arms across her chest. "He did what?" Marge nodded. "Utilities, passwords, access points, everything that could be rerouted." Tina didn't raise her voice. She just pressed her lips together and gave one small nod. "Start revoking," she said. "Don't announce. Just act." Marge exhaled through her nose. "I'll need help with the legal part. You'll get it." Tina stood, walked inside, and returned with a card. Brian Holloway, Estate and Digital Assets Attorney Strategic. Confidential. Clean. "He doesn't advertise," Tina said, "but he knows how to make locks of his own." That night, after the house quieted and Riley's sound machine returned to ocean waves, Marge opened a new document in Word. She titled it Active Lockouts and began typing bullet points. She only made it through 3 before she stopped to reread Kevin's name under admin. She deleted the word, then typed liability. Brian Holloway's office sat tucked between a title company and a pet crematorium, just far enough from downtown Lexington to avoid walk-ins and nosy neighbors. The building was beige brick with a navy door and no signage beyond a discreet bronze placard. BH Legal Services, by appointment only. Marge liked that. She arrived with Tina at her side and a pale pink folder clutched to her chest, full of passwords, account printouts, photocopies of documents, and a handwritten list of every login Kevin had ever asked for, just to help. She stepped carefully, slow but steady, past the threshold. Brian stood when they entered. He was lean, clean-shaven, with a gray suit that didn't wrinkle, and a voice like gravel smoothed over glass. "Mrs. Bell," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "I understand we need to start cleaning house." Marge nodded. "I want him out of everything." Everywhere he gestured to the chair. "Let's begin." They spent the first hour combing through her digital footprint. Brian moved like a surgeon, precise, methodical, calm. "There are 6 unauthorized points of access across 3 institutions," he said, tapping the monitor. "All recent, none have backup authorization." He assumed you wouldn't look. Marge leaned forward. He was right. Until now, Brian initiated the first wave immediately, revoking shared access, resetting security questions, changing recovery emails, and initiating fraud notices on 2 cards. "We'll lock down the back doors first," he explained. "Then we take care of the big structures." He paused. "Did he ever have power of attorney?" Marge looked down. "Yes, from when I had pneumonia 3 winters ago. Temporary, they said." Brian nodded, already pulling up the form. "Then it's still active unless revoked in writing." He clicked, printed, slid the page toward her. "We revoke it now." Marge signed in firm, slow strokes. With Tina's help, she produced an old binder that held a copy of her will. Last updated 5 years ago, back when Kevin's voice still held warmth, and Riley's drawings still hung on her fridge. Brian read through it, marking lines with a smooth black pen. "This will won't hold. Too vague. Too much room for challenge. And it gives him survivorship rights over your property." Marge sat back, spine straight. "Then we fix that." Brian began dictating a new document. "We'll draft a trust instead. Cleaner, more control. It'll activate immediately, but defer full distribution until Riley turns 25. You name a trustee. We build in protections." "Tina," Marge said immediately. "She knows where everything is." Brian gave a small nod of approval. "And Kevin?" "Nothing," Marge said. "Not a dollar, not a signature." They moved next to the deed. Tina produced the latest tax receipts and utility bills, all in Marge's name. Brian pulled property records and confirmed it was still joint survivorship between Marge and Kevin. He didn't sigh. He just began paperwork. "We remove him now," Brian said. "You're within your rights. No sale required. This becomes yours alone, retroactively," and forward. Marge looked out the window. The branches of a dogwood trembled under a September breeze. "Do we need to tell him yet?" Brian clicked his pen closed. "Not until he tries to use something that's no longer his." By noon, they'd notarized 3 documents, scanned 15 more, and filed 4 revocations, including the POA, account access, property title amendment, and the first draft of the new will. Brian handed Marge a copy of every page. "All time-stamped, all witnessed, all backed up," he said. "From this moment forward, anything he tries to touch will fail the moment he logs in." Marge held the folder like it was armor. "Good." Outside, the sun was warm but not gentle. Tina unlocked her car, and Marge sank into the passenger seat with a long exhale. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she said quietly. "Like what?" Tina asked. Marge looked out at the street, watching a man walk a black lab along the sidewalk. Leash taut, steps purposeful. "Like I got something back I didn't know was missing." The notary arrived at 10 a.m. sharp, a stout woman with square glasses and a wheeled bag full of stamps, seals, and ink pads. Brian ushered her into the conference room like it was a sacred space. Marge sat at the polished table, Tina to her right, and the pink folder in front of her like a shield. She wore the same cardigan she'd had on when Kevin first installed the fridge lock. Partly out of habit, partly out of memory. The sleeves were slightly frayed now, one button hanging by a thread. She didn't care. Brian placed the papers in front of her with measured precision. "This is the living trust," he said quietly. "It goes into effect today." She picked up the pen, felt its weight. "And this locks it?" "It seals it," he corrected. "Riley receives everything upon turning 25. You retain full control while living. Tina is your trustee should anything happen sooner. No probate. No challenge. Unless they want to lose everything." Marge began to sign. Slowly, deliberately, every page a small hammer striking wood. Brian slid the next stack forward. "This is the no contest clause. If Kevin or Alyssa tries to challenge the trust, they're legally disinherited from anything they might have once claimed. Even out-of-court settlements become off-limits." Marge glanced at Tina. Tina nodded. "Do it." She signed. Then came the life insurance policy. A modest policy for Marge's USPS retirement days. Brian had updated it to reflect Riley as the sole beneficiary, with Tina as interim guardian of the proceeds. Kevin's name had been removed completely, not reassigned, deleted. Brian reviewed everything one last time before stamping. "There are no assets left they can reach," he said. "Even if they go looking." Marge's hand trembled as she signed the final page, but her voice didn't. "Then we're done." Brian looked at her over the top of the folder. "We've just begun." Later that day, back home, Marge moved quietly around the house. She printed copies of the trust and sealed them in a fireproof envelope. She labeled it in block letters, "Private, Riley, open at 25. Then she pulled a shoebox from under her bed. Her old USPS pension statements, Riley's first-grade drawings, a worn photo of her late husband fishing off the dock in Cave Run Lake. She added the trust papers to the box and slid it back into the shadows. That evening, Kevin slammed the front door with too much force. "Wi-Fi's out again," he muttered. "Did you change the router password?" "No," Marge lied without hesitation. "Must be the storm coming." He didn't argue, just stomped down the stairs toward the basement like a man used to slamming doors when logic failed him. Alyssa followed 10 minutes later, her phone lighting her face as she scrolled on the couch. She didn't speak to Marge, just made her usual passive circuit, peeking in the kitchen trash, scanning the fridge log, glancing at Marge's plate like a teacher checking a student's test. Marge sipped her chamomile and ignored her. But that night, as she lay in bed reading, her phone vibrated. A message from Tina. "Check Facebook." Marge opened the app she rarely used. Alyssa's newest post was public. "Caring for toxic elders is exhausting. It's like feeding a stray cat that hisses every time you come near. Just once. Say thank you." The photo attached was filtered, a posed selfie in Marge's kitchen, a mug of green tea in hand, the locked fridge in the background, blurred but unmistakable. Marge stared at it, read the caption twice, then tapped share, then screenshot, then save to notes. She attached the screenshot to an email and sent it to Brian with one sentence. "Add this to the trust file under character record." Then she lay back on her pillow and stared at the ceiling. The light from the hallway crept under the door, a pale band of control that no longer reached her. Marge sat alone in her car outside the bank, the AC ticking faintly, even though it wasn't on. Her purse sat on the passenger seat, zipped tight, with every piece of paper she needed stacked neatly inside a labeled accordion folder. Fraud. Do not ignore. She took a breath, counted to 3, then stepped out. Inside, the branch manager, a polite man in his 40s with a thinning hairline and a forced smile, guided her to a side room with a sliding glass door. He offered coffee. She declined. "I believe there's been unauthorized use of my account," she said, placing the folder on the desk between them. "And I need to know what's been touched." He opened his laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Let's take a look together." It didn't take long. There were charges she'd never seen before. Supplements from a sketchy wellness site, a set of wireless earbuds, a streaming subscription to something called Body Sync, and nearly $300 in gas charges over 2 months, all tied to her debit card, all processed through mobile payments. Do you use Apple Pay? The manager asked gently. Marge shook her head. I don't even use Bluetooth. He grimaced. These were remote transactions. Someone had digital access to the card. Not anymore, she said firmly. Cancel it. Flag it. Freeze it. He nodded. We'll escalate it through our fraud team. You'll need to file a police report to get full protection and reimbursement. Already in motion, she said, sliding a second copy of the transactions, highlighted and time-stamped, across the desk. My attorney's name is Brian Holloway. The manager blinked. Well, you came prepared. I've had to. That afternoon, she and Brian sat across from a Lexington PD officer in a wood-paneled room with a fan that clicked on every fourth rotation. The officer, mid-50s, skeptical but not unkind, listened as Brian explained the unauthorized charges, the account access, the digital fraud. When Marge quietly added, "It was my son," the officer's pen paused mid-stroke. Brian didn't flinch. We're not pressing charges yet, but the identity theft flag needs to be on file. She's locking down her credit report today. The officer looked at Marge. You sure you want this on paper? I'm sure I want protection, she said. That night in Tina's kitchen, the two women worked in near silence. Tina pulled the latest print out from her wireless printer. 36 transactions in your name, she said, highlighting one with a red pen. A hiking backpack. You don't hike. You haven't hiked since Bush was in office. Marge shook her head. He used me like a tap that never runs dry. Not anymore, Tina said, flipping the stack. Credit's locked. ID alert is filed. And as of tonight, he can't even open a cell phone plan with your name on it. They sipped sweet tea and stared at the stack of highlighted fraud. Marge leaned back in her chair. Funny, I kept thinking if I stayed quiet long enough, he'd stop. Tina raised an eyebrow. And? He didn't. Downstairs, Kevin's voice carried through the vents. I swear to God, it's like living with dead weight. All she does is sit there with her tea and judge. I'm the one keeping this place running. I should have moved us out years ago. Riley was halfway up the stairs when she heard it. Her footsteps slowed, her face folding into something between shame and sadness. She came into the kitchen quietly, eyes flicking to her grandmother's face. Did you hear that? She asked. Marge didn't hesitate. She nodded once. I don't understand him anymore, Riley whispered. Marge opened her arms, and Riley stepped into them. They stayed that way for a long moment. Then Marge pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. Some things, she said softly, don't need yelling. Just action. The new bank sat on the edge of town, tucked between a garden center and a dentist's office. It didn't have a fancy lobby or free cookies, just clean glass doors, polite staff, and no record of Kevin Bell ever stepping foot inside. Perfect. Marge opened 3 accounts that morning: checking, savings, and a secure deposit box. She transferred every remaining dollar from her old bank. Brian had walked her through the process the night before: how to request cashier's checks, how to close a compromised account, how to scrub beneficiary history clean. The branch manager, a woman with a voice like bourbon and salt, handed her the final signature form. Want to authorize anyone else? Marge smiled, cool and firm. Not a soul. Back home, Marge moved quickly. She opened her Medicare portal on her laptop and navigated to the Authorized Users tab. Kevin's name stared back at her from the list. Kevin Bell, access level, full. She clicked remove. A confirmation popped up. Are you sure? She clicked yes. The screen blinked. Gone. She scrolled to the bottom of the page and entered Tina's name instead. Access level, read only, just enough. 2 days later, Alyssa stood in the kitchen with a perky tone and a color-coded calendar. So, I booked your next doctor's visit. Dr. Lipton said it's time for your quarterly labs and a nutrition. I canceled that portal access, Marge interrupted. Alyssa blinked, thrown. What? You're not on the list anymore. They'll call me directly. Alyssa's face twitched, a smile glued in place. I was just trying to help. I'm not asking for help, Marge said calmly. I'm stating a boundary. The silence that followed was colder than the fridge. That evening, Tina came by with a portable scanner and a box of pre-labeled envelopes. They sat at the dining table, Marge sorting her mail and Tina feeding it page by page into the device. "We'll have digital backups of everything now," Tina said, matter of fact. "Anything weird shows up, we'll catch it." They set up a USPS mail forwarding scan, redirecting any sensitive letters to Tina's P.O. box in Nicholasville. Alyssa wouldn't even know the important mail had changed routes. No more snooping, no more accidental envelope tears. "You're building a perimeter," Tina said, tapping the screen. "No," Marge corrected. "I'm rebuilding my house." Later that week, Marge cleared out the guest room closet. She tucked the mini fridge into the far corner behind a rolling cart, then opened a small fireproof safe she hadn't used since her husband died. Inside, she placed 3 new USB drives, each labeled in her handwriting. "Wills and deeds banking and insurance if they challenge me." The last one held something new, short videos. Marge had begun recording them that morning. Sitting in her floral reading chair, the light just right, voice steady as ever. "I am of sound mind and body," she said in the first clip. "I am documenting this because silence has never protected me." In another, "If they try to question my intentions, show this. If they say I was coerced, show this. If they show up in court, play all of it in the final video." She looked straight into the lens. "They locked the fridge. I locked my life." She saved the videos with timestamps and stored the USBs in the safe beside her marriage license, Riley's school photo, and the hard copy of her trust documents. Then she snapped the safe shut. The keys went in her sock drawer, under the buttons, beneath the scarf no one ever touched. The next morning, Kevin stormed upstairs, holding a piece of junk mail. "Why did the electric bill bounce back?" "The site says the account's been deactivated." Marge didn't look up from her newspaper. "Because the account doesn't have your name on it anymore." His face turned red. "You think this is cute? Freezing your own son out?" "No," she said, folding the paper neatly. "I think it's long overdue." Marge stood at her old HP printer, feeding in 1 page at a time like clockwork. Electric bills, dating back 5 years. Gas, water, and trash, all in her name. Mortgage stubs with her signature. Annual property tax assessments, paid with personal checks. Each printout landed neatly in a labeled binder marked, "House paid by me." She didn't rush. She printed everything. The dining table was covered now. Spreadsheets, envelopes, manila, folders arranged in rows like soldiers. The house that Kevin and Alyssa had begun to treat like a shared entitlement was getting its receipts in order. That afternoon, Brian filed the formal deed amendment at the Fayette County Clerk's office. "Effective immediately," he said over the phone. "Joint survivorship is terminated. The house is now held in your name, sole owner." Marge closed her eyes for a second, then whispered, "They won't understand." "They don't have to," Brian said. "It's not theirs." The next morning, Kevin burst into the kitchen with his laptop open, his face pale with panic. "Why is my name gone from the mortgage file?" Marge folded her arms. "Because your name was never on the loan, only the title. And now, not even that, you can't just do that." "I didn't just do it. I did it legally." Alyssa appeared in the hallway, barefoot, holding her phone like a weapon. "That's financial elder abuse if she's not competent," she said quietly, like she was testing the sentence in her mouth. "She's clearly confused. Maybe it's time to have her evaluated." Marge didn't blink. "Then do it." They stared at her, not quite believing she meant it. The evaluation request came a week later. Marge received the notice in the mail. A formal inquiry for a cognitive wellness check, initiated by concerned family members. Tina was there when it arrived. She read the form aloud, voice flat. "They really filed it." Marge sipped her tea. "Let them," Brian responded immediately. He drafted a letter backed by 2 physician-signed records confirming Marge's full mental competency. He also filed an addendum to her trust, noting the attempted abuse of guardianship mechanisms as preemptive grounds for disinheritance, should they try again. The letter's on file, he told her. So's the signature log from the last 3 years. You've made more strategic decisions in 6 weeks than most trustees make in a decade. Marge exhaled slowly. They want to paint me as weak. Brian's voice was calm but razor sharp. They're running out of paint. That evening, Marge and Tina sat on the porch watching squirrels tear through the front hedge. The sun hung low, golden and unapologetic. They really thought they'd end up with this place, Marge said, glancing at the house. The roof she paid to replace. The porch swing she refinished herself. The rooms where she raised Kevin, prayed through grief, and laughed through Riley's knock-knock jokes. They still do, Tina muttered. They think all this will outlive you, so they just have to wait it out, Marge nodded. They think I'm slipping. Tina looked over, lips pursed. Are you? Marge smiled, slow and certain. No, I'm slipping away from them. That night, Alyssa posted a passive-aggressive photo on Instagram. A sunset over the driveway. The caption, reading, "When home doesn't feel like home anymore." Marge didn't comment. She saved it. Then she printed it. Then she added it to a file in her binder. Narratives they'll try later. Brian slid the final page across the table with a thin, sharp smile. 30 days, he said, tapping the header. Kentucky law doesn't require a lease if there's no rent paid. Just notice and documentation. You've got both. Marge held the paper between her fingers like it was heavier than it looked. Form 270A. Notice to vacate. No lease agreement filed. Signed. Time-stamped. Will it hold? She asked. It's airtight, Brian replied. You're not just requesting. You're demanding, as the legal homeowner. She nodded once. Good. Make it official. The next morning, Kevin received a certified letter. He opened it at the kitchen table, Marge calmly sipping her tea across from him, and read each word aloud like they couldn't possibly mean what they said. You're evicting us, your own son. Marge didn't flinch. You have 30 days to vacate the basement suite. He laughed, a single joyless bark. You're joking. No, she said. I'm serious. And I'm done by noon. The house was electric with tension. Alyssa stormed through the upstairs hallway, muttering insults under her breath like Marge was deaf or already fading. She's not thinking straight. She's weaponizing paperwork. This is elder lunacy. Marge ignored her. She pulled a receipt folder from the drawer and began checking off utility payments one by one, placing each into a newly labeled envelope. Final prep. Move out records. That night, Marge's phone buzzed while she was folding laundry. Riley, I'm sorry. I want to stay close. I don't want to go with them if they leave. Marge sat down on the bed, staring at the message. She typed slowly. You'll always have a place with me, even if they don't. 3 dots blinked, then disappeared. Tina arrived the next morning wearing sneakers and a windbreaker. I'm here to help pack, and to witness everything they started in the basement. Boxes from Kevin's old job, unused fitness gear, piles of unopened mail Alyssa had meant to get to. Marge didn't touch a thing. Tina snapped photos. She dated each one with a small sticky note on the back. By midday, Kevin cornered Marge at the top of the stairs, hands clenched. You're cutting off your own son, he growled. No, Marge said, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. I'm preserving what's mine. He took a step forward. Tina stepped in, a camera phone already in hand. Say it again, she said. Please. Kevin backed off. The formal move-out countdown began. Marge posted a copy of the eviction notice on the back of the pantry door, next to the faded meal schedule Alyssa had laminated months ago. One meant to control her, one she now used to liberate herself. She printed a second copy and taped it to the inside of the basement door. Kevin tore it down. Marge replaced it the next day. She didn't speak when she did it. She didn't need to. The law now echoed where her voice had once tried and failed. A week later, boxes began stacking in the basement hallway. Disorganized, half-packed. Kevin made no effort to hide his resentment. Alyssa stomped more than she walked. Doors slammed. Cups clattered louder than necessary. Riley, on the other hand, floated quietly between them, her eyes never meeting her father's for too long. She spent most of her time upstairs now, in Marge's kitchen, helping chop vegetables or quietly reading while Tina and Marge filed paperwork nearby. "I don't like the way Dad's acting," she said one evening while drying dishes. "You don't have to excuse it," Marge replied gently. "You only have to recognize it." The courtroom wasn't grand. No marble columns, no mahogany benches. Just a municipal building with flickering fluorescents and chairs that creaked when people breathed too hard. Marge sat with Brian at her side, Tina just behind her, quietly holding a manila folder on her lap like it was the Book of Revelation. Kevin sat across the aisle, jaw clenched, suit jacket wrinkled from being yanked off the hanger that morning. Alyssa was beside him, flipping through a spiral notebook she clearly didn't understand. The clerk called the case. Bell versus Bell, property possession and tenancy dispute. The judge looked barely older than Riley's math teacher. Young but sharp. He scanned both parties before nodding. "Let's proceed." Kevin went first. He stood, one hand on the table, the other gesturing just a little too dramatically. "Your Honor, I've lived in that home with my mother for over 2 years. I've made improvements to the basement suite. I store work files there. I receive mail there. That makes me a tenant, and tenants have rights." Marge didn't look at him, not once. Brian stood next. His tone was colder than Kevin's was loud. "There is no lease, no rent, no formal agreement of any kind. This is a family member who was invited, not installed. He has contributed nothing toward mortgage, maintenance, or utilities. And we have evidence of efforts to exert coercive control." He turned and nodded to Tina. She handed him a folder. He slid it across to the judge. Inside were photos. Date-stamped images of the locked fridge, the laminated meal schedules, Alyssa's social media post about toxic elders, even Riley's text, blacked out for privacy, confirming the emotional environment downstairs. Brian continued. "There is also a notarized affidavit attesting to the installation of monitoring tools, food restrictions, and digital interference with Miss Bell's Medicare access. All while living rent-free," Kevin cut in, red-faced. "I was helping her." That was all out of concern. The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Bell, you'll have a chance to respond." But Kevin didn't. He sat, hard. The silence felt like victory already. It took the judge less than 10 minutes to rule. "Based on the evidence presented, I find that the respondent was not a legal tenant. No lease existed, and no payments were rendered. The petitioner has full ownership of the home. Possession is restored to Miss Bell, effective immediately. Mr. Bell and any related occupants are ordered to vacate within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in sheriff enforcement." Kevin stared ahead like he'd been slapped. Alyssa's lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something. But the judge was already calling the next case. Marge stood, smoothed her cardigan, didn't say a word. Outside the courthouse, Kevin muttered, "So this is what you wanted, huh? Humiliation? Public theater?" Marge turned to him, her voice low and calm. "This is what I earned. You should have read the fine print on respect." He opened his mouth to argue again, but Tina stepped between them, phone camera already rolling. "Just in case," she said. "Wouldn't want another scene like the one in the kitchen." Kevin walked off, heels scraping the sidewalk. Alyssa lingered a second longer, then she pulled out her phone. An hour later, Marge saw it. A new Facebook post, public. She weaponized paperwork against her own blood. Remember that when she smiles at you, no photo. Just bitterness distilled into pixels. Marge saved it, printed it, filed it under the tab marked Character Notes, Ongoing Behavior. The moving truck arrived at 9:17 a.m., its diesel cough echoing through the quiet neighborhood like an unwelcome announcement. Marge sat on the front porch in a padded rocker, mug of coffee balanced on the armrest. Her back was straight, cardigan buttoned, legs crossed at the ankle. Tina stood just beside her, holding her phone in both hands, the red recording light already blinking. In the driveway, Kevin emerged from the basement, red-faced and sweating, dragging a cracked plastic tub labeled seasonal clothing. Alyssa trailed behind, balancing a stack of half-filled boxes with her elbows out like wings. Neither of them looked toward the porch. The first piece of furniture, an IKEA futon with a broken leg, scraped loudly across the pavement as two movers wrestled it out the side entrance. Tina leaned in slightly, voice low. "Still want me filming?" "Yes," Marge said, without looking away. "Every last box." Inside, the basement echoed with motion, thuds, rustling, the metallic rattle of a forgotten exercise bike. The door to the suite swung open and shut as movers ferried things up the narrow staircase. Mismatched dumbbells, piles of electronics, a beanbag chair Kevin swore he was still planning to donate. It went on for hours. Kevin passed Marge 3 times without a word. On the 4th, he paused at the foot of the steps and muttered, "Hope your will gets rewritten again when you're really old. When you forget who's supposed to take care of you." Marge took a sip of her coffee, calm as ever. "It already has," she replied. "You just didn't make the cut." Kevin's mouth twitched, like he wanted to say more, but Tina took a deliberate step forward, still filming. He turned back into the house. Alyssa wasn't as quiet. By mid-afternoon, as the movers loaded the final mattress into the truck, she stood at the bottom of the porch steps, arms crossed, lips curled into a weaponized smile. "You really think this makes you strong?" Sitting there in your little rocking chair like queen of the suburbs, Marge didn't answer. "You know what people say about old women who live alone?" Alyssa hissed. "They rot, just slower than the rest." Before Marge could reply, Riley stepped out from behind the screen door. She'd been upstairs all day, helping Tina inventory final pantry items, organizing her own school binders. Now she stood silently beside her grandmother, shoulders squared, face unreadable. Alyssa glanced up and saw her. Their eyes met. Riley didn't say a word. She just looked away. That silence rang louder than anything Marge could have said. Alyssa scoffed and turned back toward the truck. When the last box disappeared into the cargo bay, the driver nodded toward Marge. "We'll return the basement key to the envelope inside, ma'am." Marge stood slowly, walked down the porch steps, opened the screen door, and stepped inside. A few minutes later, she returned, holding a small silver key in her palm. She crossed to the side entrance of the house, the one Kevin and Alyssa had claimed as their own, and inserted the key one last time. Click. She pulled the door closed behind her, slow and final. Then she turned the deadbolt. She slipped the key into an envelope and sealed it. Tina handed her a small label maker. Marge pressed the button, and the tape slid out with a faint mechanical hiss. "Do not duplicate." She stuck the label across the envelope and tucked it into her fireproof safe. The morning was overcast when Marge walked into Brian Holloway's office, but her mind was clear. She wore navy slacks, a pressed blouse, and a brooch Riley had given her last Christmas. A tiny silver oak leaf, sharp-edged and deliberate. The file folder in her hand was thinner now, not because she had less to protect, but because most of it was already locked down. Brian stood as she entered. "Today's the nail in the door frame," he said. "Once we sign, it's irrevocable." "Good," Marge said, settling into the chair across from him. "That's the point." He opened the first document, page after page of fine-tuned language, built to outlast argument and grief and rage. Riley Bell, sole beneficiary, full inheritance released at age 25. Interim trustee, Tina Morris, dispute clause, penalty clause, distribution clause, all final. He slid the pen across the desk. Marge signed. A small, quiet flourish. Nothing dramatic, but inside, something unlocked. "The prior version?" she asked. "Invalidated by today's filing," Brian said, double-checking the timestamp. "Kevin's claim is gone. Not frozen, not delayed. Gone. Even if he finds an old copy, it's a ghost. She nodded. Then we're done. We are. Except she wasn't. That afternoon, in the sunlit corner of her dining room, Marge opened her laptop and navigated to her inbox. There it was, the inevitable email. Subject: You've gone too far. From alyssa.bell@wellness-forward.org. The message was brief, performative, laced with weaponized kindness. We're concerned about recent decisions. We believe Kevin's removal was reactive, not rational. I'm happy to provide character references, family history, and wellness records to reestablish trust language. Please consider mediation before litigation. It's not too late. Marge didn't reply. She clicked forward, typed Brian's email address, added 2 words in the message body. Please file. Then she blocked the sender. By early evening, the house was quiet again. The porch lights flickered on at 7:03 p.m. The mail arrived at 7:15. Inside one envelope, a thank you note from the local senior legal clinic. Marge had made the donation the day before, $15,000 in Kevin's former name. Restricted funds, designated for emergency elder law services. It was the largest single donation they'd received that year. The note read simply, "Because dignity is worth defending." Marge tucked the card inside her fireproof safe, behind the file marked Asset Reallocations. She didn't tell anyone about the donation, not even Tina. Later that night, the kitchen smelled like butter and cinnamon. For the first time in months, Marge baked, not from duty or habit, but from want. She rolled the crust by hand, no timers, no measuring spoons, no glances over her shoulder for judgment that never came. Just jazz on the radio and flour on the counter. She filled the pie with tart Granny Smith apples and her late mother's crumble topping, oats, brown sugar, and nutmeg. As it baked, she leaned against the counter, exhaling. No locked fridge, no portion charts, no fake praise from people who resented her breath. Just her house, her kitchen, her rules. When the oven dinged, she pulled the pie out and set it on the sill to cool. Something she hadn't done since Riley was in elementary school. Footsteps padded softly into the kitchen. Riley, hair damp from her shower, hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands. She paused at the doorway. "You made pie?" "I did," Marge said, smiling without apology. "Want the first slice?" Riley nodded and crossed the room. "It smells like before." "Before what?" Riley shrugged. "Before everything got weird." Marge handed her a plate. "It's not weird anymore. It's just us now." The light in the guest room was soft that morning, filtered through gauzy curtains Marge had sewn herself decades ago. The house was still, the kind of quiet that didn't demand anything. No voices, no stomping. Just the soft hum of her laptop and the blinking red light on the small camcorder perched atop a stack of books. She looked directly into the lens. "My name is Marjorie E. Bell," she said, voice steady, eyes clear. "I am of sound mind." And this is not a confession. It's a record. She paused, long enough to breathe, not long enough to falter. "For years, I thought silence would smooth things over. That quiet meant love. That being small made me safe." She leaned in slightly. "My silence wasn't weakness. It was collection." She reached into her lap and held up a printed screenshot, Alyssa's caption about toxic elders, the fridge lock glinting in the blurred background. "I watched. I listened. I wrote it all down, and now it's filed." Her fingers didn't tremble. "They locked the fridge. I locked the door." She clicked the stop button. Tina arrived an hour later, laptop tucked under one arm, a portable hard drive in the other. "Ready?" she asked. Marge nodded. "More than." They sat side by side at the kitchen table. Marge handed over a USB labeled Legacy Vault, September 13th final. Tina inserted it and began transferring files. Legal documents, notarized statements, time-stamped photos, the camcorder video, and every scanned receipt and email Brian had told them to preserve. All going in, Tina murmured. Encrypted, cloud-backed, and double authenticated. Only Riley can open it. Marge stirred her tea. She won't need it until much later. But she'll have it, Tina replied. And that's the point. That afternoon, Brian held the door open for both of them as they arrived at his office, now familiar enough to feel like a second home. He looked up from his monitor, tapping the side of a sealed envelope. Third-party validation came through, he said. Your estate plan has been independently reviewed and sealed for long-term defense. If contested, it triggers full evidentiary review. No room to reinterpret your intent. Marge sat. Let's add one last thing. She pulled a typed page from her purse and passed it to him. Brian read silently. It wasn't long. If my estate is ever challenged, this is my statement. They locked the fridge. I locked the door. They controlled meals. I controlled memories. This is not revenge. This is correction. The silence is over. Brian looked up. Where do you want it filed? Under final testimony. With a video backup, she said. And make sure it's read aloud if they contest a single comma. He smiled. Consider it done. Before they left, Marge had one more stop. She and Tina pulled into a small credit union next to the post office. No wait, no fuss. Inside, she asked for a 529 account officer. I want to fund my granddaughter's education, she said. The teller's eyes lit up. Wonderful. Starting amount? $50,000, Marge replied. Prepaid. Locked to her name, Tina exhaled, low and slow. The paperwork was simple. The peace wasn't. When Marge signed the last form, the teller said, Would you like to add a note Riley can see later? When she uses it? Marge thought for a moment. Then she wrote in careful cursive, You deserve doors that stay open. Back home, just before sunset, the notary arrived. The same stout woman with the square glasses and calm presence who'd witnessed the trust papers. One final signature. One final witness. The last document was notarized, witnessed, sealed, and filed. No gaps, no echoes. Just the finished architecture of a life reclaimed. After the notary left, Marge sat on the front porch beside Tina. The trees rustled gold above them. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and fell silent. Think we've done enough? Tina asked. Resting her arm along the back of the bench, Marge took a slow breath. No, she said, but we've done everything that matters. The flour dust rose like breath when Riley dropped the bag on the counter. It hit with a soft thump, clouding the sunlight that spilled through the open kitchen window. No measuring cups? She asked, half grinning. Marge smiled, reaching for a cracked mixing bowl older than Kevin. Biscuits don't need perfection. They need feel. Riley raised an eyebrow, sleeves already rolled up. That sounds like a metaphor. It is, Marge replied, setting out the butter, a flaky one. They laughed, not politely, not nervously, but deep and real, the kind of laugh that didn't echo off sharp words or judgment. The fridge behind them hummed, full, unlocked, humming, its shelves stocked with heavy cream, fresh greens, raspberries Riley had picked last weekend. The pantry door stood wide open, a small chalkboard on the inside, listing nothing but what they loved. Peanut butter, cornbread mix, tea leaves in glass jars. No charts, no logs, just choice. Marge showed Riley how to cut the butter into the flour with 2 knives, how to sprinkle buttermilk in little streams until it clung just right, how to turn the dough with light hands and press it down with even lighter ones. Riley leaned over the counter, nose dusted in flour. It's messy. It's supposed to be. By the time the biscuits went into the oven, their hands were sticky, the radio was playing old Dolly Parton, and the world felt smaller, in the good way. Riley leaned against the doorway while the kitchen filled with heat. I feel safe here, she said softly. Marge looked up, biscuit cutter still in hand. She didn't rush her answer. I do too. They didn't say anything else for a while. The timer ticked gently. Later that afternoon, after Riley went upstairs to shower, Marge sat at the table and pulled out her emergency contact card, the one that had lived in her wallet for over 15 years. It still listed Kevin as next of kin. She took a pen and crossed his name out. Not in anger, just with finality. In neat handwriting she wrote, Primary Emergency Contact, Tina Morris Secondary, Minor, Riley Bell. Underneath, in smaller print, if anything happens, they know who I am. She folded the card, slipped it back into her wallet, and leaned back. The biscuits sat cooling beside the stove, half a batch already eaten, crumbs dotting the counter. No cleanup yet. No rush. Tina arrived 10 minutes later, dropping off a fresh set of notarized copies from Brian's office. Peace delivery, she said, waving the manila envelope. You missed a biscuit, Marge said. I'll forgive myself. Tina paused in the doorway, watching the kitchen scene. Dishes in the sink, flour on the rug, one half-burned biscuit sitting lopsided on the tray. Can I take a photo? Marge tilted her head. Of what? This, Tina said. The way it looks now. The way it should have always looked. Riley appeared again. Her damp hair tied in a knot, hoodie sleeves pushed back. Tina raised her phone. Smile, you two? Marge stood beside Riley at the stove. They didn't pose, they didn't straighten anything, just stood how they were, shoulders barely touching, the tray of homemade biscuits between them. Click. Tina looked down at the screen, then nodded. I'll print this one. Marge took a long breath, filling her lungs with cinnamon, butter, and something better. Freedom. She looked around the kitchen. The walls were still yellow. The cabinet still creaked. The floor tile was still chipped by the back door. It wasn't big. It wasn't new. But it was hers again. This house isn't big, she said. It's just mine again. The new refrigerator made no noise when it opened. Just a gentle whoosh of air and the soft hum of temperature control. No clicks, no keypad, no lock. Just food. Marge stood in front of it barefoot, morning light draped across her kitchen like a promise kept. She pulled out a mason jar of peach preserves and set it next to the biscuits she and Riley hadn't finished yesterday. Cream still sat on the top shelf. Real cream, no rationing, no notes, no charts laminated in someone else's voice. She spooned the preserves onto a biscuit half and let it sit, soaking into the layers like memory. On the counter beside the toaster sat the photo Tina had printed, Marge and Riley, shoulders together, flour on their cheeks, biscuit tray between them like a peace offering from the universe. Marge picked it up and traced the edge of the frame with her thumb. Underneath the photo, a small brass label read, Ours. Across the room, the fireproof case sat on a low shelf, sealed tight. Inside, every document, the trust, the deed, the affidavit, the receipts, the photos, the final will, the statement to be read in court if necessary. A lifetime sorted, protected, notarized, witnessed. On the lid, one label, handwritten in Marge's clean script. For Riley only. No one else's name. No open ends. The house creaked softly in the September warmth. No arguing, no stomping, no doors slammed in protest. Just the sound of quiet ownership. Tina stepped in through the side door, carrying a bag of lemons and a sleeve of iced cookies. I brought backup in case you made something healthy again. Marge smiled. Too late. I already opened the good jam. Tina set the bag down, glanced around the room, then lifted 2 mason jars off the drying rack and filled them with sweet tea. She held one out in toast. To airtight revenge, she said with a grin. Marge accepted the glass. To airtight strategy, she corrected. No yelling, no fighting, just math and ink and a deadline. They clinked. Tina leaned against the counter. You really did it, you know. You didn't just get them out, you got you back. Marge took a sip of tea, then set it down and looked out the window. The porch swing moved lazily in the breeze, the same one she'd refinished herself years ago, sanded, stained, and tightened with her late husband's wrench set. Riley had sat on that swing just last week, her earbuds in, textbook on her lap, legs tucked under her. The future had returned without announcement, just showed up, sat down, and stayed. I thought it would feel more like a fight, Marge said quietly. Like fire. What does it feel like? Like closing a window I didn't know was open. Quiet, whole. They stood that way for a while, letting it breathe. Then Tina opened the fridge and laughed. You know what I just realized? It's still weird to see it unlocked. Good, Marge said. Let it be weird. Let it remind me. She walked back to the fireproof case and rested her palm on the lid. That wasn't just revenge. It was a reset. On paper. In motion, Tina nodded. And what about Riley? She has proof now, Marge said. Proof that women don't just survive things. We reroute them. Tina raised her tea again. Damn right. Outside, a car passed. Slow, but not stopping. The mailbox stood straight. The porch light flicked on automatically, not out of fear, but habit. Later, when Riley came down for breakfast, she paused at the fridge before opening it. Marge saw her hesitate. The ghost of a rule once weaponized. Go on, Marge, said gently. Nothing's off limits anymore. Riley opened the door and pulled out the cream. Want some in your tea? She asked. Marge smiled. Please. They moved around each other easily. Two people who'd reclaimed not just a house, but the rhythm of one. As the morning bloomed behind them, Marge turned back to the kitchen, placed the final copy of the updated emergency contact form into her wallet, and smoothed her cardigan. No alarms, no threats, no plan left unfinished. Just this house, just this table, just her name on every line that mattered. And as she sat down to butter her biscuit, she said it aloud, not for Tina, not for Riley, but for herself. My son locked the fridge so I'd eat less. So I locked every account he'd ever touch.